Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Super-Fanta-Fi. This being a show where we talk about TV shows of the supernatural, fantasy, and/or science fiction genre. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of Teen Wolf, as well as the latest episode of Twin Peaks. Like always, if I'm talking about something you want to listen to, you can always look in the description down below. I include the time when I start talking about each of those respective shows. So, for example, if you want to hear what I had to say about this week's episode of Teen Wolf, you can skip to what I had to say about this week's episode of Twin Peaks. But the first thing I want to talk about is this week's episode of Teen Wolf. A very good episode with a lot of stuff that went down in it, so let's break things down piece by piece. A big part of the episode is figuring out, like, oh, what's up with this whole, like, hunter situation, like, because, you know, the insignia looks like the Argent symbol, and so now it's like, oh, did Argent do it? It's like, you already know. It's like, nah, Argent didn't do it. Like, we already know who did it anyway, but we already know he's not necessarily behind all this, to a certain extent. I mean, I'll go ahead and talk about it. It kind of makes, well, I would assume she made it maybe because she came across the symbol before, because she made that, like, I guess she just got lucky and the bullet ended up killing, the Hellhound. That, or like someone gave her the weapon, like, because it seems like Gerard has been helping, like, we see him at the end of the episode. He's the one that's been, like, he backs her up when Brett attacks her later on, but I know I'm bouncing all over the place, so I do apologize. I just want to get some of the stuff out off the top of my head. It seems like Gerard might have been helping her, supplying her at least. Like, he already saw, he's like, oh, you know, protecting someone with, I see, with great potential. I mean, granted, I guess in his eyes also, it's like his kids are his disappointments. It's like you have his son hanging around with supernaturals and stuff like that, and you have his daughter being one, so it's just disappointments all around. So, last time we saw him was season 5? Yeah, part 2 during season 5. That was the last time we saw him. But I'm thinking it's maybe he's the one that's kind of been helping her along the way. It's like, oh, she already wants to hunt down supernaturals and stuff like that. So I guess, like, he just helped her from afar, but now he reveals himself like, hey, I'm here to help you. Because a big part of this is also, because I was wondering, is it some kind of religious angle? Because when she attacks Brett early in the episode, she goes, oh, you don't deserve this power. It's like, I don't hold nothing personally against you, but you don't deserve this power. I guess the part of me was like, is she like some part of some, like religious, like, fanatic group or something like that, like in the sense of like, oh, this is powers that should only be given to Lord, like humans should have access to these abilities and stuff like that, which should be fair. Like, there's supernaturals all over the world. Granted, you don't really know who's who, but I mean, they do kind of compliment the fact is that she is just, I thought she was an amateur, but there was a team behind her and everything. It's like, no, she's seriously by herself, but it does seem like what they're probably going to set up is Gerard leading a team of hunters, because there was even a conversation Malia had in the episode being like, oh yeah, all the hunters are gone. I'm like, no, they're not. Why would she say that? And I guess, like, I guess it's to be interpreted as like the hunters in Beacon Hills are going. We have not seen the hunters since season 2. Yeah, the hunters last popped up in season 2, so I guess Argent kind of disbanded them when he stopped hunting and everything. Because I was about to say, because like when they went looking for Derek in season 4, basically Scott and them ended up running into a Mexican group of hunters who, like, later on popped up a little bit later on in the season, I think. But it's like, I guess they were specifically talking about the hunters in Beacon Hills, because they have not popped up. Obviously, you had in season 4 the ones for the Deadpool, but they were just kind of outsiders coming in to Beacon Hills. So, but at very least, I'm guessing that is kind of going to be his, like, part of the story, just gathering up an army to take out supernaturals. Because it's so interesting, because it's like when you actually think about, like, the whole, like, what is it called? Oh, I'm going to piss myself off for not knowing this. Jackson became one in season 2, and Tracy was one. I can't even. Thank God, that would have pissed me off if I had forgotten that. Like, I feel like there's a few things I should know, and it's like, I should have known that. Thank goodness I remember that. But, you know, like, he went through the trouble of trying to take control of a Kinema and making it his own. So it's like, it's not like, but I guess it's like that was him using a supernatural to put it into other supernatural. So it's like he has a weapon. It's just a weapon. So, because to me, it's like you hate supernaturals, yet you would work with one. I guess it's like a means to an end type of thing. As like I said, it was not like he would be working with it. It'd just be a tool. Nevertheless, that's me kind of going on off that. So I guess she doesn't really know that Liam is one. Once again, she is an amateur, the counselor, because she's talking to Liam. It's like, oh, if there's anything you need to go off your chest. I'm thinking she probably thinks Liam's just a normal kid, but he's mixed up in all this supernatural stuff. Maybe she kind of has a feeling for Mason, but she definitely takes an interest in Liam. So I don't know, maybe there's a side of her that's like, oh, I am actually a good, you know, counselor, and I just want to help Liam better himself because I know he has such great potential. So maybe that's what that is. Maybe she has an inkling that there's something else. I mean, it was actually like, you know, Liam's ball, like he had stuck his claws inside of it, and she saw Brett, the way Brett was playing. So, like, it definitely seems like she isn't on Liam's trail to a certain extent. But it was kind of interesting in this episode, too, seeing Brett kind of pushing him. Obviously, he's kind of being a dick. But in all honesty, he's trying to help Liam because Liam is off kilter like he's never been before. Like, probably like his early days as a werewolf, but, you know, he's kind of kept his cool. But now, like, once again, things are changing, and so he's losing his balance. And Brett's like, you need to essentially get your shit together, dude, because, like, yeah, like, you know, before you end up getting someone else, you either hurt someone or you get someone hurt, like, by your actions of you just losing your cool and kind of wolfing out like that. So, because this is the first time in a while that Liam's anger is just real. I mean, season 5, but that was special circumstances around Hayden, so it's like that doesn't really count. But just like full on losing control, just because it's like, you know, his foundation is gone, you know, like I said last episode. So that was just kind of an interesting thing. But obviously, I love the whole situation with meeting up with Argent again. They're like, yo, where is he at? They couldn't get in contact with him and everything. And I love, like, Malia guessing all those passwords. Guns. Lots of guns. Oh, hunters. Yeah, the password's not hunters. But they end up breaking up his arms deal that he was doing. Obviously, it was a trap because he's like, yeah, people have been buying up guns a lot lately, so he's trying to figure out who they are and what their whole motivation is. I can only assume that that's all connected to Gerard and, you know, what, like I said earlier, the army he's building. But I love the whole situation of, like, they're like, yo, we're here. They're like, what are you doing here? We're your backup. Like, I already had an inside guy, and then Malia's like, well, where is he? He's like, you're standing on him. And then during the whole gunfight, Malia's looking like, because Argent's like, come, get the dude, my dude. And then she's like, what? No, like, it's gunfire and everything. And they stop to reload, and then Scott looks at her like, come on, go get him. And she's like, oh, fine, if I have to. I love Malia's attitude about the whole situation. Like, she doesn't, because, like, Malia is one of those, like, examples of a hero who doesn't want to be a hero. She's just like, I get caught up in these situations. I wanted to go to Paris. I didn't even want to be here. Kind of just that teenage angst a little bit, too. I just thought, I think that's a beautiful thing about her character. It's like, she doesn't necessarily want to be here, but she's there helping anyway. And there's actually a beautiful moment between her and Scott, because she's constantly asking Scott about why he freaked out in the woods earlier. And I thought that was kind of a cool thing of, like, you know, he thought the hunters were after him, and he tackles one of them, and ends up being Sheriff Selinsky. And then Scott's, like, wolfed out, and then, like, he tried to hide his face, and all the other cops are around it. Like, one of the ladies is like, what's with his eyes? So it's like, you know, Scott's asking, like, do you think you've seen any, you think they saw anything? And Parrish's like, no more than they've already seen. Like, the fact of the matter is, you were never part of those conversations. Throughout the entire series, we've never been a part of those conversations. Like, yeah, something's up. Yeah, all this weird stuff that happens in Beacon Hills. Like, we never get those casual conversations between people. We get it between, like, especially, let's not forget what went down in, like, season 5, like, the beast attacking, like, the school. Once again, like, that's what the kid was freaking out about the library last episode. That's one of those situations, like, that's us tapping into it, because that's never been tapped into the entire series. And I think this season is definitely going to be the one that kind of kicked that up. I mean, but really quickly finishing what I was saying, it's like, the fact is that Malia was like, no, I'm not worried about that. The only reason I'm worried about you because, you know, I'm not freaking out because you freaked out. I'm asking because I'm worried about it. And it's like, oh, look at you caring. Because it's like, oh, Scott's your friend. He's part of your pack. And you're like, oh, you're looking out for your friend. It's just one of those beautiful things, especially because you see, like, because it's one of those things where it's like, it shows you how much she's grown. Obviously, like, we've seen over the course of the series, she gets closer to people. Because the person she was closest to always was Styles. And now to see, like, oh, that doesn't just stop there. Obviously, it went as far as Lydia. Now you see it happening with Scott. Like, the fact that she's branching out. Like, she's not that lone coyote that she once was. And it's just, they have that little laugh of being like, she's like, well, I was hunted by my dad. And he's like, well, I was hunted by my girlfriend's dad. And just kind of laughing about it. And I guess it's that instilled fear of, because, you know, it's something that Scott's never really had to deal with, but I think it brought up those feelings again, because it's like, as a werewolf, there will always probably be people hunting him that worry of some, like, what dangers, like, waiting around the corner, especially after everything, not even just hunters, but everything they've been through, I think. But specifically that moment of just being hunted down like that has never really come up again since, like, all that stuff with Argent back in the day, so I don't think he's ever really felt that in a while. So, but once again, kind of explaining the whole situation, Argent explaining, like, it is a silver bullet because it's heated up a lot more and everything. Because, like, silver bullets is a myth. you know. And the reason why she, like, it seems like she is an amateur in all this. Once again, focusing on the account, sort of like, she probably did, like, just read a lot of folklore. It's like, the question is, how did she get into this whole thing? You can only assume maybe someone she was close to got killed by the supernatural. Maybe Gerard kind of saw something ahead of her. And she, like I said, like, helped her from afar, like, introducing her to it. But for her to go as far as, like, making a silver bullet, that was just kind of interesting. But the fact is, they had the Argent signature. I guess it's a thing where I was thinking maybe, Gerard sent it to him, and now I'm like, no, maybe she actually made it herself. And it's like the Argent's name actually means silver, so maybe when she was looking up how to kill werewolves or something like that. I mean, the question is, does she really? It seems like she's kind of up there in the air about all this stuff. I guess she just lucked out that Silver ends up killing hellhounds, because it doesn't seem like because she was looking at Brett healing and everything. It's like, oh, if someone who really knew about werewolves would know that werewolves heal. That the fact of the matter is, because she has slashed him across the face, and it's like, oh wow, you heal. So I guess it's a situation where it's like, I mean, she's actually lucky that, you know, Brett's a beta, because I guess she did, you know, if he was an alpha, that scratch would be a whole different other situation. Well, yeah, because it doesn't, as we've seen, I always forget that, like, it doesn't take just a bite. Scratches can make you, we've seen that with more than one case, that being Lydia becoming a banshee like she did, potential to be a supernatural was already there, as well as Kate becoming the were-jaguar that she did. So, but a really cool thing about this episode, and I think this episode in itself, it's like even more so than like the last episode, which did a good job of setting it up. Like, it set up the big aspect of things are changing. This episode is really setting up our like big battle, in a sense of like, fear is going to be the big motivator this season. There was that moment of like Liam walking through the hallways, people staring at him. He sits at his desk, at the table in his class, and the girl gets up. So it's like, do they know, or do they just have some feeling like, you know, that Liam kid's weird? Something's weird about him. I don't know what it is. I mean, once again, it's that situation of like all these years of like weird supernatural stuff happening in Beacon Hills is like, it's picking up in a sense of, a big part of it, it's like fear is a big thing that's motivating everybody. You know, people are acting out of fear, and like people are very unpredictable when they act out of fear. So it seems like they're kind of setting that up, that's why Gerard, you know, maybe Gerard's fanning the fires and be like, oh, we've got to stop all these creatures, because actually the whole thing in Eichen House kind of plays a big part in that. Like, the guy who was running like the basement section of Eichen House, he locked up Parrish. He killed all those supernaturals. He was going to even kill Parrish. The way they set it up, it's like he actually killed every supernatural that was locked away in Eichen House, and that sucked big time. Just because at first I was like, oh, is he part of the same group as that counselor? It's like, no, it's just for him. He's like, I spent so much of my life locking away things like you to protect people. It's like, why am I doing that? The best thing to do is wipe you out. So it's that same mentality of like fear. Like, not every supernatural person is a bad person. Like, look at Scott, his pack. They've done nothing but good things, you know? I mean, out of obviously this particular situation, when releasing whatever they did from the Wild Hunt, they literally saved the entire town multiple times. So it's like, you know, do they get any fame or glory or thanks for it? No, they just get beat down, battered and bruised over and over again. And that whole situation played a big impact for Lydia's character, too, because it's like, Lydia hasn't stepped foot in there since season 5, like, going through everything she did, you know? And it's like, you see that, it's like PTSD hitting her, like, every time she's in there, because all the memories flash back. But knowing that Parrish was going to die and the guy's plan, she, like, pushed her fear aside, and she saved him. So, I think that was kind of a big moment of Lydia's, of being like, pushing aside her fear, because that's why Parrish didn't want her to go in there. It's like, literally every time you go to Eichen House, you almost get killed. So it's like, let's stay away from Eichen House. It literally happens every time they go to that place. That place is not good. It's not even just her. Pretty much everyone that goes to Eichen House for story purposes, it almost gets killed. It's a bloody mess. But the thing is, I'm thinking, what if that's what this whole thing is about? The monster that escaped, the thing that escaped from the Wild Hunt. Because we see those spiders throughout the entire episode. Now, what kind of makes me think that maybe these things act upon fear? Because it's like, you know, hey, like the kid that they infested, you know, it seems like, oh, he's quote unquote okay. But it's like, oh yeah, I'm here, we got a history test tomorrow, and he's just like acting weird and stuff. I'm like, what if they act upon, what if this thing feeds on fear? Because it went after Theo at the beginning of the episode. Luckily, Theo stabbed himself in the back and pulled out his knife. Pulled it out, but the moment he did, it disappeared. So I was like, whoa, is this some magic stuff? It's like, did someone weaponize some magic or something like this? Like, no. This has to be that evil. Like, it must be like some kind of spider demon or something that feeds on fear. And maybe to some level, that might be what happened to Scott in the forest. Like, maybe one of those things is on him or something. Maybe they've implanted themselves in every person, and why Liam is so, like, not being able to control himself. Because even, like, the Hellhound last episode was like, wait, it's not you. So it seemed like, I'm thinking maybe he's picking up minute traces of it, but he just couldn't necessarily pinpoint it. So maybe that's what it's about. But the thing is, like, the fact is it went after Theo makes me think that might be true, that it tacks on to fear. Because that particular player was, like, worried about, getting on a team and stuff like that. The only, like, younger players that ever got, like, I think it's, like, kind of basically the varsity team, essentially. Like, the only person that's ever been able to do that is both Scott and Liam, to be, like, I think first years to do that. And maybe this particular person was super scared and it fed off that fear. But going back to Theo, it's because Theo has nothing now. He's, like, we see him living in his car and he's parking somewhere and sleepy, but cops constantly wake him up because he can't be there. So he's moving from location to location. Because he has no place, he has no home. He destroyed everything for his incessive need for power and need to be special or important. He sacrificed everything: his family, his friends, the people he could rely on. So he has no place to call home. Like, even kind of showing you the emptiness that he came back for. It's like, yeah, he got his freedom and everything, but for what? He has nothing to show for it because he killed and betrayed everyone that trusted him. And so maybe that fear of, like, oh, now I have nothing, maybe this is how I'm going to spend the rest of my life, is what attracted it to him in the first place. At least that's how my mindset is. There's even a moment he was going to call Scott, but he couldn't. I mean, he couldn't bring himself to do it because it's like, even though he helped out last season, it doesn't make up for all he did in season 5. Manipulating and hurting people and killing people. It's like, it doesn't make up for that, So I think that's his main reason for, like, because let's not forget, Malia reminded him, at the end of part 1, it's like, like, Theo showed up, it's like, yeah, but Scott's not alone. And then Malia's like, yeah, but he's not part of the pack. It's like, he's once again all alone. So that's why I'm thinking, like, this thing is feeding on fear, and maybe it's pushing all these other people to get more nervous and fearful. And that's kind of making it stronger, and it's feeding off that. That's kind of where I'm thinking this season's going to go. And Gerard's situation is not going to make it any better. So maybe that's what's finally making these people, especially the doctor in Eichenhaus, as well as Gerard himself, to act now, is because this thing is pumping fear through their veins. Like, because that, to me, I think that's the legitimate reason why Scott, like, imagined the whole, like, Hunter thing, like, why that fear is all of a sudden just popping up like that. It's never really popped up before, but then again, maybe just seeing that bullet and everything, it took him back to that moment. And now he's kind of having a little similar PTSD moment like Lydia is, So, I don't know. I think that's something to think about. Maybe there'll be something that kind of comes of it, maybe not. But it's definitely an interesting development. And it'd be kind of interesting if that's where this route goes. I mean, like, they're already kicking up this season to be like, yo, like, because this thing that escaped is kind of taking a back seat to the hunters right now, because it seems like they're the kind of forefront, because, especially this one in particular, the counselor, because it's like, she's kind of an amateur, so likely to get a lot of people hurt. So, and once again, it seems like it is like a culmination of, like, everything that's happened over the course of the series is coming to a head in this one, like, season of, like, people are like, yeah, things aren't normal around Beacon Hills. Like, what's up with Scott? What's up with his eyes? Did you see his eyes? Like, what's up with, people starting to notice. And once again, with the Liam situation, I don't know if it's like whispers are going around just like, hey, do you know, yeah, that Liam kid, he's weird. Yeah, like, weird stuff is going around. Yeah, that Liam kid's kind of part of all that weird stuff that's going down. So, I don't know. We will just have to wait to see. I'm excited to see, like, what else happens, what else goes down this season. And now moving on to this week's episode of Twin Peaks, there is a lot to break down, so let's quickly run through some things. First of all, there's the whole Doppelganger Cooper who shows up and he's after Ray, but then there's the dude, the boss, his name's Renzo, is in a way. And I love that whole conversation. The moment he's like, yeah, you have to challenge it to an arm wrestling competition. I'm like, in my head, I'm thinking, that's pretty stupid. And then Cooper's me like, is this like a nursery or something? Is this kindergarten? Are you stupid? Really? This is going to be settled by arm wrestling? And I love the fact that he called it out. But, It's like, hey, you get one shot. You win, you're the boss. If you lose, then you have to serve under this guy. But if you don't do what Renzo says, you die. It's that type of thing. And no, it's like in 14 years, he's never been beaten. I'm like, wow, this is, that's some pretty interesting initiation. And it's like, okay, I'll do it. And if I win, I get Ray. And they go and they arm wrestle. And it's like, oh yeah, Renzo's winning. But it's like, Doppelganger Coop isn't even trying. And he's like, nope, starting positions. Over and over throughout the entire thing. Just constant mindfuck of being like, nope, starting positions, nope. And then he's like, oh, this way, it hurts. See, when you bit my arm, it hurt a little bit. Now, see, doesn't that hurt? And then he slammed the guy's arm and ended up winning. You can hear his arm breaking. And then Cooper punches him in the face, and his face like gets caved in a little bit, and he's dead. It's like, wow, had no idea Doppelganger Cooper was superhuman like that. That's crazy. Like, we knew he could survive a gumball with all that supernatural crap that's inside of him and stuff with the whole Bob situation, but for that to be the way, and everyone's looking like, holy shit, you want Ray? He's right here for you, boss. You want a room to yourself? Sure thing, boss. And then like Ray ends up explaining some things like why Cooper, like why Hoop set out to hit on him, and it's like, oh, Philip Jeffries wanted you dead. But in particular, Jeffries wants specifically what's inside of you, so I'd assume it's Bob specifically, because Bob is like a powerful essence that I guess is the key to like tapping into the Black Lodge or something like that, or maybe it's like, I mean, obviously we see what Bob inside of Doppelganger Cooper can do, giving him superhuman strength, so I'm guessing that means it's like, oh, hey, this means that we can make it our own and weaponize it in a sense and make us ourselves powerful. Once again, maybe Bob will act as a means of getting to the Black Lodge. So maybe that's kind of what this is all about. Kind of like Wyndham Earl was all about getting to the Black Lodge. Maybe similar circumstance. I mean, considering the fact of the matter is Jeffries was in part of that group, the Blue Rose program, searching into all this stuff, and it's like the Black Lodge is kind of it's out there. So it's kind of like, of course, like he'd want to get there too. So seems like they're setting him up to be kind of like the main antagonist of this like season of like, he's got to stop Jeffries before he gets to the Black Lodge. He even gave Ray a ring to put on him the moment he died, one moment he killed him, and I guess like Ray was so freaked out and guess he didn't think much of it. It's like it's insignificant, but then there's the whole thing with those shadowy people that came out and it freaked him out or whatever, and then he kind of saw that thing coming out of Cooper's chest, and it was like Bob. So. But it seems like, from what we could see when Ray ended up dying, it seemed like his body went to the Black Lodge to a certain extent. I can only assume that's his soul. So it was meant to bring Bob, it's probably Bob, if not Bob and Doppelganger Coop. I don't know whether they're considered two separate entities at this point. So it's most likely get Bob back into the Black Lodge. It was kind of like a setup there in that sense, or maybe it was meant to send Doppelganger Cooper back so that they could have access to Bob, or set Bob loose. I mean, it's hard to say, either or. Or maybe put Bob back in the Black Lodge or waiting room or whatever, and maybe they could get access to it and then get there themselves. But what's also interesting is that we end up seeing the other side of that whole situation with Ruth. It turns out Ray's the one that most likely did what he did to her, because he's trying to get the coordinates. But we know last episode that the coordinates are what was on her arm, so maybe she had written them down, and like he did what he did, trying to get the information out of her. That's how I can only assume. So we, as the audience, knows that those coordinates lead to Twin Peaks. So why would he need the coordinates to Twin Peaks? Like, what is it he's specifically looking for? Or maybe he's trying to find the next location that the Black Lodge would pop up, and then you would automatically assume Twin Peaks. And so, but then what is Doppelganger Cooper getting out of this is what I'm trying to understand. And what does this all have to do about going back to Twin Peaks? Because because obviously everything that went down years ago was kind of like the Black Lodge, this is going to tell you the time and date and where the Black Lodge is going to open up. So maybe that's the same thing here. Like, all this entire time has been looking for a means to access the Black Lodge, like, without being pulled back. I don't know. Because it seemed like everyone's being held towards Twin Peaks. Like I said, everything's coming full circle. Everything's leading back to Twin Peaks. So we do see the ring kind of being put on the table by Gerard or, Mike. I still don't know which one he is. I would assume that's Gerard, but maybe it's not. Maybe it actually is Mike. Who knows? Along the same lines, we had the whole situation. Well, really quickly, I almost forgot. We saw Richard there too. So there is like some deep connections there, because Richard's connected to that group, and he ended up running into Cooper, but I don't know if he knows who Cooper is. Like, that's what I'm thinking. Because he was looking at Cooper like maybe he knew who he was, or just like, man, this guy's badass, and maybe he's going to decide to start rolling with Cooper, and maybe when he starts rolling with Cooper, he ends up finding his way back to Twin Peaks, and maybe then Cooper's like, oh wait, you're from Twin Peaks? Yeah, my parents, my family, all those people I hate and stuff is connected to Twin Peaks. Maybe this ends up bringing Cooper into the drug game that Richard's mixed up into. I don't know. There's so many possibilities of where things could go. But getting to the point I was going to make is the whole situation with Dougie, aka Real Cooper. The Mitchum brothers are super happy about it. Like, hey, giving his boss a whole bunch of stuff, giving Dougie a lot of stuff, like giving him like a jungle gym setup in his backyard for Sunny Jim, gave them a new car, and his Mrs. Jones is super happy about it. His wife is like, oh my God, Dougie, you did it. I'm so in love with you. I was worried because you were gone all the time. I was like, I love you so much. It's like, and she's so happy. It's like, winner. I can't help it. It was so good. And then at the same time, you have Anthony trying to poison Dougie, but then he kind of like, Dougie got distracted by cherry pie, and then he sees all this powder on the back of Anthony's jacket, and it touches his shoulders, and then Anthony just breaks down because it's like, he figured me out. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. And throws away the coffee, and he's apologizing. Like, I tried to kill you, with poison and everything. I was like, wow. Did not expect things to go down like that. I was like, how is that situation going to get remedied? How is, like, the other side, like, how is the waiting room or whatever going to save him? It's like, no, they didn't. It's actually his own, inhibitions of wanting cherry pie kind of ended up saving him, and I thought that was kind of amazing. And in fact, this Anthony's like revealing all this stuff, and he's just like, I'm so sorry. He also pointed out something that maybe it's been apparent this entire time. I never realized that, but their boss was talking about the fact of, hey, like, even Dougie implicated himself to prove, like, the fact is that you're dirty, as well as the two cops that he ends up talking with are dirty. So that in question makes me go, oh, so Dougie was a part of this whole situation, dude? I didn't pick that up. Maybe that was their way of, like, introducing that. That was kind of interesting, but I didn't know Dougie, because they say even Dougie had to implicate himself in this whole situation, so it's like, oh, so he was a part of it too. I mean, at least the quote-unquote original Dougie. But it's like, okay, so I want you to test. He's like, fine. I hate you so much because I consider you my friend. You were my top man, go-to person. He's like, all right, you know what? To make this up for all the bad stuff you've done, he's like, oh, Dougie stopped me from being a murderer. It's just, I'll do anything. He's like, I haven't been able to sleep lately. I've been vomiting up blood. I'm like, wow, that's pretty intense. So he's like, okay, I'll testify against, Mr. Todd. And then he's like, okay, also those cops too. It's like, what? So we also know that the cops are talking about calling Mr. Todd themselves. So that brings in the whole question of like, what does that mean? Because it was Todd who asked him to handle this. But now that I guess that Anthony went to them, now it turns into an even bigger situation. Don't know how that's all going to play out, but now that it's like, oh, you're going to be working with the cops, I assume it's going to be kind of our three bumbling cops, because the prince came back as like, oh yeah, Dougie's prince, yeah, he's some prince from some guy who escaped from prison recently, and a missing FBI agent. Oh, that's got to be wrong. Yep, throw it away. It's like, dude. But the fact is, they've been ran means that it's in a system, so it's probably going to flag the FBI. I don't know. We'll see. It'll probably be like a next episode thing. Maybe we have to wait and see. But I'm so interested to see how that all plays out. I love how just things are like working out for him. Like, it's dumb luck, but at the same time, kind of like divine intervention essentially. And I love that aspect about it. Then we got a little bit of time with Shelly and her daughter Becky. Becky's flipping out because Steven hasn't been around for like 2 days, and Shelly's like, okay, get some cherry pie, we'll sit down and we'll have that talk, which is like, oh, that's sweet. It's kind of interesting that most of their conversations don't really have anything to do with Bobby. Once again, I'm curious about that whole family dynamic of like where they stand. I mean, it seems like obviously Shelly's dating, so her and Bobby sadly never worked out. I mean, but you do see, like, the fact is that Bobby kind of does want things to work out, because he's like, oh, is Shelly here? Oh, she's already gone home. So he sits down with Ed and Norma. It's like, Ed, Norma, you're in the same scene together. I mean, obviously, this is the first time seeing Ed after the time skip, but it's like him and Norma. And it's like, oh, I don't want to interrupt anything. And Ed's like, oh, nothing's going on here. So a guy, Walter, shows up, and it's like, oh man, you guys still didn't get together. Granted, where they left off is kind of like, that was a convoluted and complicated situation, you know, the whole, oh, Nadine's back to being herself again. It's like, Ed, she's still, you know, like, oh, where are we, Ed? And then there's the whole Mike situation, but like, she wasn't Nadine anymore. She wasn't the Nadine he was used to anymore. So that kind of complicated things. It's like, they were in that phase of like, we can't really be happy. So I guess that was kind of a situation that they just let it go. But you still see, even like when Ed's like, oh, we'll give you space. So him and Bobby moved to a different table, but you still see him at moments and Nora locking eyes. And I was like, oh, dude, it's that couple. You're like, I don't care what the circumstance it is. Get together already. It's like, it seems like even after all these years, you're still like pining and longing after each other. Granted, like I said, we don't know what happened during that time to get, maybe they were together and they split up, or maybe after that whole Nadine situation, they never got back together. So it's like, oh, we had our whirlwind romance and we just had to leave it at that. Seems like she moved on, possibly. Granted, we don't know how long she's been dating this dude, Walter, who's kind of a money dude or a business dude, because like he's talking about the fact is that Norma's restaurant, the Double R, is actually a franchise. There are actually 5 restaurants in total, and they're like doing super good. It's like, oh, they're starting to make a profit, except for the one here. Because why? Because you're like selling your pies super cheaply. You're not charging people a lot for them, and it costs a lot of money to make. But then Norma's like, I don't know, people say like they love the cherry pie here, and she's heard from other customers like, oh, the other restaurants don't serve it as good. Like, nah, this Double R is the best. Her boyfriend, Walter, is all about like, hey, I mean, granted, I would assume her boyfriend, maybe it's her husband, I don't know. Granted, he doesn't know Ed, because he's like, oh, who's that guy's name again? It's like, his name's Ed. He's like, oh, right, yeah, sure, whatever. So it's like, so you don't know about that whole situation. Once again, they're just in that stage of like, hey, we're friends and hanging out and talking, but it's like you see it. You're pining and longing for each other. Like, you know, you see those moments when their eyes, you know, you can't keep your eyes off each other. It's still bubbling, that whirlwind romance, but it seems like life has just made it so you couldn't be together. I mean, because I kind of appreciate that about this series too, is like, everything where you're kind of like, you thought Bobby and Shelley was a sure thing, at least where they ended up. It's like, no, that kind of fell apart, sadly. I mean, granted, you would, at the very least, at some point in that time, they had a kid together. So there was something there. Granted, it just didn't last. And maybe now that Bobby's older, maybe he's like, no, you know, like to try and make things work out with Shelley, you know. I mean, we'll see. Once again, we saw her current boyfriend, or the dude she's like dating right now, is like, we know he's connected to the drug game. So that's definitely not going to last long. So we'll see. It'll probably be a situation where Bobby has to arrest him, and then like him and Shelley get together afterwards. I mean, probably have to give her some time to kind of recuperate from the fact that her boyfriend just got arrested because he's connected to drugs and everything. It's like, because it's sad, because, you know, I think I brought that up before. It's like Shelley went from one terrible relationship to the next. It's like, not like Bobby was like the best prize. Once again, he was an idiot teenager. We've all been there. So there's that. But he's a different person now. He's kind of got his shit together. He's like a cop and everything. So it's like, maybe once again. I mean, that doesn't necessarily mean that, oh, everything will work out, but maybe things are more likely to this time. But, you know, we'll just kind of have to wait and see on that. Also, the whole Norman Big Egg situation. But the fact is that Walter is like, hey, we should change the name of this restaurant to Norma's Double R. You know, the whole franchise thing. And she's like, no, it's been the Double R for like 50 years. That's here in Twin Peaks. That's what they know it as. And I'm going to leave it as that. But it's like, oh, your name means so much. It's like, oh, we'll go out and date, right? We'll go on a date, right? And she's like, yeah, sure, whatever. And it's like, oh, it's like she seems happy, but it's like, I don't know. I don't know if it seems like genuine, if it's like genuine happiness, or she's kind of going with the emotions of like, oh yeah, you know, maybe she feels like, oh yeah, I'm on, you know, more mature now, and it's just like, I don't have the luxury of just waiting around, you know. It might be one of those situations of like settling just because she's getting older or something like that, which is a shame. You should never settle. If you're in love, man, go for it. But once again, there are complicated circumstances. I mean, legitimately, all you have to say is, it's Twin Peaks. It's like, oh, right, of course. Something else that popped up in this episode is like the music section of the episode that took place in a roadhouse. It was James, interestingly enough, playing the song that he wrote and sung in the original series with Maddie and Donna, and then there's a whole situation of like the two backup singers kind of representing Maddie and Donna. But there was a lady in the back of the Roadhouse who was tearing up a lot, and it's like, wait, is that supposed to be like his daughter or something? And she's like crying because of like what the song represents or something like that? Or is she just someone that just like, oh, the song hit her? Like, does she have some kind of, I would assume she has some kind of connection to James. Is that like his daughter? with Donna or someone else. I mean, because that's another relationship that was kind of up in the air because James had left town. He didn't come back. Did he? I can't remember because I remember James left. I think he came back and then he left again. Yeah, because he went to because after that whole thing with that married lady and her husband being killed and her brother and that whole, well, not her brother, it was actually her real husband. I think that just a whole complicated situation. I think he came back to Twin Peaks and then he left again. Or did he never go back to Twin Peaks after that? I don't remember. Nevertheless, I'm pretty sure he went off on his own, so him and Donna were just kind of up in the air. Kind of almost like possibly let's move on type of thing. So, once again, we haven't seen Donna, so we don't know how everything kind of turned out about the whole, Ben being her dad and everything, too. It's a whole thing, so. I'm just curious whether it's just, I don't know, the fact that she was crying just makes me think, she has to have some connection to James, whether that's his daughter by someone else or whether that's his daughter by Donna. We'll have to wait and see. So, and also there was that whole situation with Sarah in this episode that was kind of interesting. How she was just drinking and smoking and watching TV, but the thing she was watching, like an old boxing match, kept repeating itself. I don't know whether that meant anything or not. It just kind of was okay, that happened. Sure. And then finally, there's a whole situation with Audrey. She's talking to that dude, Charlie. She's like, what happened? Can you tell me what happened? He's like, no. And she's like, sometimes, there's this whole element of her story that I'm like, does she have amnesia to a certain degree? Does she not remember everything? Because she's like, sometimes I feel like I'm someone else. Do you ever feel like that? You're supposed to be somewhere else, but you're someone else? And he's like, no. Charlie's like, I'm always feel comfortable with me. He's like, oh, you're having essentially an existential crisis. And she's like, no, I'm not. She's kind of fuck off about that initially. And then she's like, okay, do you want to go to the Roadhouse? And she's like, okay, how far is it? He's like, you know where the Roadhouse is. You've been there multiple times. And it's like, wait a minute. Because the fact of the matter is, the fact that she doesn't know how far the Roadhouse is, it's like, you have been there multiple times. There were times in the original series you've been there. So it's like, what's going on there? And the fact that she's like, I kind of want to go, but I kind of want to stay. And she's like, he's like, oh, I will end your story. And she's like, what story? The story of the little girl that lived on the lake? I'm like, what is her circumstances? I mean, maybe her whole, we do know she was in a coma after the bank situation, so it's like, maybe she was in that coma for so long it messed with her memories in her head, so everything's not 100% the way it is. But for him to know that she went to the Roadhouse and stuff like that, it's like, what is up with his situation? Is he kind of holding her captive and trying to pretend like everything's okay? Or is he just a normal dude that kind of got caught up in an extraordinary situation in the sense of Audrey being kind of not under the most normal of circumstances of maybe things got messed with in her memory or something like that. For her to be like that, because obviously that's her referencing the fact that living in the Great Northern, which is on water. So I would assume that's her referencing that, talking about the little girl that lived in a house on a lake. So I'm like, so does she not remember? What's going on there? Is there an amnesia thing or just what is it? Developments, like most episodes, I don't know what everything means, but I'm very interested to find out what they mean. It also seems that Bobby and Hulk and Frank still haven't gone to follow that message, because it was like, oh yeah, he was talking to Ed about it. It's like, oh yeah, we found some stuff from my dad we're gonna go check out and stuff like that. Obviously not getting too deep into it. Does bring up the question too that Ed is there, what about the Bookhouse Boys? Because the only one amongst them that was a part of the Bookhouse Boys, obviously James and Ed and Hulk, but, Frank and Bobby weren't a part of that. But are they aware of that? Because you even had, Doppelganger Cooper bringing up the fact is, did Jeffries ever mention a Major Briggs? So, interesting thing. So, I'm very curious. Like I said, at the beginning, everything is leading back to Twin Peaks. But really, that's all I want to talk about in this episode. To the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.